What if the Kanto starter Pokemon swap types, making Charmander the water-type starter, Bulbasaur the fire, and Squirtle the grass? Then what if we swap them again, and then did that for every single generation, making for 162 forms that may even be better than the original, like Squirtle, the grass-type Squirtle with a cactus for a tail. Its evolution Warthordle is now grass ground type, and even has some cactus flowers growing on its body. With its final stage Cactoise even trading out its 2 large cannons for 2 huge cacti, which launch a bevy of thorns in all directions. Bulbash is a fire-type Bulbasaur with a candle on its back, a candle that starts to become alive on its evolution Irisaur, which also sports the ghost typing, because its final stage has actually fully passed away, with its husk now completely piloted by the giant candle demon. Slugander is a water poison type Charmander, and based on the highly venomous blue Glaucus. Slugmeleon now has larger fins for faster swimming, and Glaucozard has changed to a water dragon type because the blue Glaucus is also known as a blue dragon. But swapping their types again gives us Squirtle, a fire type Squirtle, which is actually based on a grenade, because as we can see with its evolution War Torrent, it now has 2 constantly firing cannons on its back, and Tanktoise is now a fire steel type, whose 2 molten mortars somehow give it even more firepower than the original. Bulpad, the water type Bulbasaur, is now much more frog-like. Its evolution Sleepysaur is a super chilled out amphibian that spends most of its day napping, culminating in Venusaur Snore, a Pokemon that's so large that it actually allows its pre-evolutions to live on top of it. And while most of the time it can be found completely asleep, if anything threatens its flock, Venusaur will ensure that's the last thing they ever do. Brambander is the grass-type Charmander with a vine for a tail that gets much larger on its evolution Bramhelion, and Charizard is much different from the fiery monster we're used to seeing, as it's now a wise forest sage. But by swapping the Gen 2 starters, you'll get the fire-type Charcorita, whose evolution Bayheat no longer has vines around its neck, and instead has a series of volcanic funnels which plume flames in all directions. With Magmanium now spewing so much lava, it can completely cover the battlefield in a matter of seconds, forcing the enemy to play a literal game of the floor is lava. Cyndaquil is a water-type Cyndaquil with a much different body, because Thin Aqua now has a design based on a prehistoric shark, and Tideflosion is the apex predator of the deep ocean, as once it gets a hold of you, it will ravenously bite away with its metal jaws until nothing is left. Toothadile, the grass-type Totodile, is now covered in a swampy algae, which Crocoswamp spikes up into a mohawk, and Feralibayou being considered so dangerous that legend says they can only be found in the backyard of someone who lives in Florida. Sea-Doo Shrub has traded in its bursting flames for a leafy bush. Quillsharda stays on all fours and begins to grow rocky spikes on its back, which turn into indestructible stone bear claws on its final stage Typhussion. Coralita traded in its legs for fins. Bay Reef has adorned itself with beautiful shells, giving it the fairy typing, and Plesanium is a giant version of the once small plant because it's based on a dinosaur known as the Plesiosaurus. Tindadile now has a much darker color palette and has turned the spines on its back into flames. Crocapalm is now bursting with fire energy and can be found exclusively living near volcanoes, with Filigator serving as the volcanic mountain range's scariest resident, as it's known to attack anything that gets near its magma cave home. And swapping my favorite generation of starters will give you Tree Crunch, which has a crunchy fall leaf for a tail. Stovile gently waves its large tail on the ground to spread flame in a wide cone in front of it, while Sepferno casts small but very hot Will-O-Wisp from its back, allowing it to burn the foe no matter what their evasive maneuver. Muddirt uses its inflated cheeks to sing a high-pitched screech, and is actually a grass normal type to go along with the many sound-based moves. And Marsong has gained a wide variety of notes that it belts out from the forest floor, a pleasant treat for campers unless they're trying to sleep. And Suavepert has gained a deep, rich baritone that infatuates all who hear its sultry sound. Tychick is a very quiet and calm first stage. Cumbriskin is no longer a hand-to-hand fighter, and instead has chosen a life of meditation, giving it the psychic type, transcending into Blaziken, who's put away its kicking ways in order to achieve enlightenment. But on the opposite end, Mudrip loves bashing its flaming head into foes. Saw is a maniac who front flips into enemies to cut them with its steel mohawk. And Sawpert has axe blades attached to its eyes. That should tell you all you need to know about it. Treecoral has a stick of coral for a tail. Grove Bio allows weaker fish Pokemon to live inside its larger coral tail as a home, with Ecotile carrying around an entire ecosystem on its back, which it protects with its life, allowing for even the weakest of aquatic Pokemon to survive and thrive where they would otherwise be food. Torchicory is much closer to an actual chick. Combustkeen has gained the ability to fly by rapidly flapping its less than optimal wings with sheer determination, but Blaziken uses its large leafy cape to glide extreme distances, even through the dense foliage of the jungle. If Gen 4 swap types, you'd get the rock-eating Cortwig that uses its rocky jaw to eat even the toughest of stone. Exhaustal has clouds of smoke running down its body rather than bushes, and Tortonic is a living volcano that's able to fire lava miles into the air. Chimchum is a sea monkey in a literal sense. Monswimo has a larger tail that it uses to slap foes in the face with Swimfernape still having the fighting typing, but with a much different focus, as while it's a master of one-on-one combat while underwater. On the surface, it's actually very uncoordinated. Vineplup loves to eat berries and makes its own juice-catching bib out of leaves. Pineplup has began growing small seeds on its body, which sprout into hardened wood blades that its final stage uses to hunt down evil monsters, as its built-in wooden stakes make it the perfect answer to vampiric Pokemon. Turtortle now resembles a sea turtle, whose evolution Gravetull carries petrified coral on its back, and its final stage Torterror is a haunted ship that carries with it the souls of all those lost at sea. Quicklup is based on a bomb. Prideplup has gained the fighting typing and a superhero mask you might recognize, as its final stage Imberleon is based on Endeavor from My Hero. Chimchi is much closer to a regular monkey. Monferno is equipped with thorny brass knuckles because its final stage Infoilape is a grass dart type that only fights using chaotic guerrilla warfare tactics. But if you swap the iconic Gen 5 starters around, you'll get Oshawood, who's a beaver with a maple leaf. Do Work is a Pokemon that does just that. It do work, constantly building small structures in the forest utilizing fallen trees. But Lumberot doesn't need to wait for the trees to fall, as it's strong enough to pluck its building materials straight out of the ground, roots and all. Sneon is a Pokemon that hates losing. As it said, its evolution's flames will grow larger and larger with every hit it takes. And Sephiroth is so prideful that if it looks like it's losing a battle even slightly, its flames will grow so large they destroy everything nearby, including itself. Teppup is a much different looking aquatic Tepid, as Humpite is based on a large humpback whale, and Imblue is so heavy that in battle it fights like a sumo wrestler, shoving foes into the ground and crushing them under its raw weight. Sneal is a Snivy that turned into a water poison type, because as we can see with its evolution, they're based on the many highly venomous species of water snake. Its evolution, Sir Sidon, even uses its trident tail to inject foes with a quick spreading toxin that causes the target's body to completely shut down in a matter of seconds. Oshamber wields a rock instead of a shell. White has formed that rock into a long blade that Samurnite carries like a medieval knight, giving it the fully formed blade I always wish the original had, as well as replacing its previous samurai inspiration. Tepudge is closer to a wild hog than a domesticated pig, and Pignaw is known for sneaking into people's gardens and eating until there's nothing left. And Calibor is much more of a beastly boar that's pure evil, attacking homes and villages for no gain of its own, but simply for the love of destruction. Swapping the Gen 6 starters is interesting because we also swapped their RPG inspiration, as Frocape is a grass Froakie with a cape that evolves into Frog Squire, a warrior squire with a leafy plume on its head, because its final stage Granite begins to use its sharpened tongue as a sword, making it easily one of the grossest fighters in the Pokemon world. Chesprin has replaced Delphox's role because Quillamage is now a fire-casting mage whose durable exterior has been replaced with flowing robes. And Arcnaut now carries a giant Archmage staff, which does make it very immobile, but when you're able to launch earth-shattering fire spells like it's able to do, nobody cares. Ninja has of course replaced Greninja's role, as Fakezian uses bubbles casted on its own feet to glide around in complete silence. And Delpho is a master of this aquatic movement style, making it seem like a character straight out of Naruto. Spellkey now has its turn to be a mage, because not only has Archon Deer began casting fireballs, but it also has a magically well-kempt smoke mustache. But Grimoirja now uses its tongue as a staff, as it can be seen floating around the battlefield on a cloud of smoke, launching down saliva-soaked fireballs from above. Urchpin has a barbed helmet. Skilladin may not have the best build for stealth, but because it can sling its own broken-off barbs like a flurry of shuriken, it doesn't really matter. And Chesnobi produces barbs so large it can stick them into surfaces and use them as platforms, giving it a strange but highly effective way to outmaneuver enemies. Finitwig is ready for its turn to be a warrior, as Braixen has turned its once wand into a staff with a bladed leaf on the end. That Delphite sharpens into a full-on sword, as it now fights with no tricks, no magic, no movement, just straight up slice and dice mayhem. Moving up to Gen 7, where the first swap is Rowlet with an eye. Dartorch is ready to riz up any enemy with its fire hairstyle. And Death Sinjui no longer uses arrows, but slings its own hardened feathers as if they were throwing knives. Litide is a cat with a built-in fishbone. Torracuda is just as nimble in the water and on land, but the best part about it is that it stays on 4 legs, because Incineroar is a monstrous force that adorns its body with the bones of its slain enemies. And Poploha has a grassy skirt, because as we can see with Suacian, it's traded in its singing skills for hula dancing. And Primoformer is now impossible to anger, as even when attacked, it will simply initiate a swaying dance battle, forcing the opponent to relax and unwind. Rowlish has been turned into a little squid, which fits because just like owls, they also have beaks. Dartoxin is ready to employ yet another weapon-based strategy, as Decidueye wields its own harpoon-shaped barbs, which it hooks into foes, giving them an extreme injury that only gets worse if they try to pull the barb out. Litzlet are known to live in close-knit packs, where they are protected from harm by the many flora cats that make up the majority of the Pride's members. However, only one of its final stages can be seen in a pack at one time, because as soon as another flora cat evolves, the two will enter a brutal fight to the end, with the winner going on to lead the pack, and the loser being buried. But don't worry, the Gen 8 type swaps aren't nearly as intense. I mean, look at Gruka, who turned its wooden stick into a metal cooking spoon. Adorable! Chef even made its own fork and spoon to go along with its built-in chef's hat. And Grillaboom gave up its drum for a large cooking pot that it uses to make its own 5-star meal. Sottle is a bit less of a little crybaby and evolves into Spitzile, who's known to collect poisonous berries found across the forest floor before firing them out of its own self-made blow dart. In fact, its evolution in Teleage has become so good at this strategy that it completely stopped looking for its own food, instead choosing to follow closely behind other Pokemon while they do their own foraging, before incapacitating them with its blow dart and taking their hard-earned food. Scorboyant has changed the sport it plays, because Baboot is always practicing with its bubble ball and goggles to evolve into Aquace and become a master of water polo. Drucy now plays the steel drums, as they offer a much more beachy sound. Wacape is so dedicated to this vibe that it even got 2 pieces of coral for twice the drumming. But that's still a far cry from Tintaboom's dedication, because it's now in a symbiotic relationship with an octopus Pokemon, which it allows to feed on its own brain in exchange for extra arms to drum with. Wax Bunny has once again traded sports, because Rablitz uses a stick and berry to play lacrosse. But it's not all for fun and games, because it's also how Timber Ace fights, ripping berries top shelf with such speed and precision, it can hit foes right on the temple and put them out in a single Oran berry. Solval is a much more intense Sobble. Blazeile has turned its tail into a flamethrower and is no longer based on James Bond, because Intillery makes it clear it's a rapid-firing action hero inspired by Rambo. But what happens if you swap the most recent generation? Toy Croco has a much scarier face and a water spout on its head, a spout which begins to bubble over on Crocolure and turns into literal flowing hair on Surfadur, which it even lets its little bird friend hang 10 on. Quaxleaf may have changed types, but its hair routine stays on 10. However, Crestwell also has a tail feather to style as well for twice the Aura Dominance, which transcends into the peacock-inspired Opalaval, the standard of forest fashion. Sprigonite is much more fox than cat. Figato stays on all fours. I hope you're noticing the trend. And yes, its final stage is is another firefighting type. But hey, if Nintendo can do it 3 times in a row, then I can do it a couple times too. Toy Dino is said to hold a powerful secret. Its evolution Mossalor is very docile because it spends most of its life guarding the seed on top of its head. Because when it evolves, that seed becomes a dragon fruit, which not only grants it with new overpowered typing, but it can also use that fruit to lure in hungry prey before snapping down on them with its large wooden jaws. Spritzito has a starfish pattern on its face because its evolution Stargato actually uses starfish as weapons, slinging them at foes like throwing stars. But Starcato takes this one step further, using starfish to latch onto the target's face before channeling its psychic energy directly through them, turning whatever they latched onto into a mind-controlled drone. But Frizzly shows what happens when Quaxly cares less about its hair and more about combat, with Flashwell easily being the fastest striker of all the starter Pokemon middle stages, and Quaquavolt is so fast that the only part of its punch you'll see is the after image. YouTube thinks that you'll like this video of some other fan-made Pokemon we've made, so if you like today's video, make sure to check out that one. And huge thank you to the artist Drake, who I collaborated with to make every single one of these Pokemon. They can be found in the description. This project was absolutely huge, and they did amazing, so definitely make sure to go check them out. And I'll see you all in the next video, but until then, peace.